I almost didn't go. The dinner invitation had been sitting in my inbox for 3 days. A family get-together at my parents' house. Ryan's idea, of course. He always had a flair for arranging things like he was hosting a royal banquet. I could already picture him at the head of the table, laughing a little too loudly, telling stories that began with back when I closed that billion-dollar deal. Still, I went. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't care anymore, that his voice didn't echo in my head the way it used to, that I'd grown, that I was enough. I pulled into the driveway 10 minutes late and sat in my car a little longer than I should have, staring at the front porch light flickering in the dusk. My hands were cold. I rubbed my palms together and took a deep breath. "You can do this, Ava?" I whispered. "Just dinner." Inside, everything was the same as it always had been: immaculate, candlelit, and a little too perfect. My mother smiled when she saw me, but with that same tension around her eyes, like I was the last-minute RSVP they had to squeeze in. My father nodded politely. He'd always been the quieter one, following wherever my mother's favoritism led. And then there was Ryan. "Wow," he said, rising from his seat with a smirk. "Look who made it. Ava, the app designer." The room chuckled. My ex-boyfriend Adam, sitting to Ryan's left, snorted into his wine glass. "It's good to see you too," I said, trying to smile. We sat around a long mahogany table, the kind only families like mine have for decoration and Christmas dinners. Crystal glasses, polished silverware. Ryan had brought a data sleek, model-thin woman named Claire who looked like she'd stepped out of a perfume commercial. "So, Ava," Ryan said, halfway through the main course, "still working on your little tech startup?" "What's it?" Called again. Spark something. Sparkment, I replied quietly. I cut into my salmon, but my appetite had vanished. He grinned. Right. Still just you and your laptop trying to change the world." Adam laughed louder this time. "And you always had those big ideas, remember?" In college, she wanted to create an app that helped people learn to cook blindfolded. It was a sensory training app for the visually impaired, I corrected. But no one was listening. Ryan leaned back, glass in hand. "Look, Ava, not everyone's cut out for the big leagues. Some of us just stay in our lane. It's not a bad thing. It's just how the world works." Silence wrapped around me like a cold scarf. My chest tightened. I felt the old familiar heat rise behind my eyes. I glanced at my mother, hoping for even a flicker of defense. She just dabbed her mouth with a napkin and said, "He's just teasing, dear." And that's when my phone buzzed in my lap. I ignored it at first. I didn't want to give them one more excuse to mock me, but it buzzed again, persistent this time. A short vibration, then another. I lowered my hand under the table and peeked at the screen. "Langford CEO. Congrats. Acquisition finalized. Call me when you're free, boss." I blinked. Read it again. "Boss." It hit me like a quiet explosion. The merger had gone through. We had closed. I was now the majority owner of the company I'd built from scratch. I looked up at Ryan, who was mid-story about his New York office views, and in that moment, I didn't say a word. I just smiled and excused myself from the table, claiming a call I couldn't miss. Out on the back porch, I pressed Langford's number with trembling fingers. He picked up on the first ring. "Chairwoman Ava Cole," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "You own 60% now? It's official." I leaned against the railing, my knees weak. "Wait, you're serious?" "T as a heart attack," he chuckled. "We're about to be in every country's automation infrastructure in the next 18 months. You're the owner of one of the fastest growing companies in the sector. Congratulations. I work for you now." I closed my eyes. The cool night air brushed against my skin. "They have no idea," I whispered. "Let them catch up," he said. "Enjoy your evening, boss." I hung up and looked up at the stars. For the first time in years, I let myself cry, not from pain, not from humiliation, but from a release. a quiet triumph. A buried dream finally sprouting through concrete. They didn't know. They thought I was the girl still fumbling with ideas and hoping for miracles. But I was already the miracle. And soon, they'd see. They always said Ryan was born with greatness in his blood. He's a natural leader. Mom would beam at school functions, just like his grandfather. Got your father's business mind, they'd tell him at holidays, clapping his back as if they were toasting a prince in line for the throne. And me, I was the quiet one, the creative spirit, the emotional dreamer. Code words for not Ryan. I remember being 7, holding up a drawing I'd made of a robot that could help Grandpa walk. Ryan had just returned from a science fair, where he won 2nd place. Everyone crowded around him like he'd discovered gravity. I stood there with my drawing, arm outstretched, for 5 full minutes before finally tucking it under a magazine. That moment, it defined most of my childhood. The older I got, the more invisible I became. When Ryan made the honor roll, we celebrated with steak dinners. When I made the honor roll, it was great job, sweetie, and back to scrolling through Ryan's LinkedIn. The more I tried to prove myself, the more it seemed I was just background noise. So I stopped trying to impress them, stopped bringing my wins to the dinner table, stopped explaining why I skipped law school to start my own thing instead. I worked through nights, birthdays, even funerals. I worked while Ryan posted vacation selfies in Italy and 10x grind set quotes from business conferences he barely stayed awake through. I worked when investors ghosted me. I worked when my first team quit because we couldn't afford salaries. I worked when I cried alone in my tiny studio apartment with a cracked window and 3 unpaid bills on the fridge. And when the first small client came from Berlin, asking if my little AI script could automate their invoices, I said yes without knowing how I'd actually deliver it. I learned, I delivered. They paid. And they told a friend, and that friend told 5 more. Within 6 months, I had contracts across 3 countries. Within a year, I had 10 developers, an office no one knew about, and a growing list of companies relying on Sparkman's infrastructure to run their daily operations. Still, I didn't say a word to my family, not out of shame, but because it felt good to not need their approval. For once, I didn't want applause from people who only clapped when Ryan spoke. I wanted to build something so real, so undeniable, that one day they'd see it without me ever having to say a word. That day was coming faster than I realized. It was Langford who helped me stop playing small. I'd hired him originally as a part-time consultant, polished, sharp-minded strategist with 20 years in AI and enterprise systems. But what I didn't know was that Langford had once built a $300 million company from scratch and sold it to Oracle. And for some reason, he believed in me. I don't get it, I told him once. Why work for a no-name like me? He smiled and said, because I've seen what happens when underdogs get tired of losing. He taught me how to pitch like a shark, how to negotiate equity without blinking, how to lead without begging for permission. Within another year, we were a team of 80 offices in London and Toronto. Monthly burn rate in the hundreds of thousands and a revenue stream big enough to keep it flowing like a river. And now? The merger. Langford had spent 6 months negotiating behind closed doors with an infrastructure titan that wanted our back-end tech. They didn't want to build, they wanted to buy, and they paid generously. The deal closed that evening, right? Before Ryan's dinner. The moment I read Boston Langford's text, I knew everything had shifted, but I also knew I wasn't going to scream it across the dinner table like Ryan would have known. My win would speak for itself. I spent the next morning working from my apartment's rooftop. The city buzzed below me as I sipped burnt coffee and reviewed the Forbes draft article Langford sent over for final approval. Underdog CEO quietly builds $40 million AI firm, now powers 1,100 plus businesses worldwide. I scrolled through it. It still felt unreal just then. My phone buzzed again, another group chat notification from the family. Ryan. Yo, Ava, Mom says you left early last night. Hope you're not upset. We're just teasing, lighten up. No apology. Just the same smug energy he always carried. I stared at the message for a moment, then muted the group. Let them keep teasing. Let them laugh because, in 48 hours, the city's biggest tech gala was happening and Sparkmint was being honored for Best Scalable Platform in Automation. What they didn't know yet was that I'd arranged for Ryan's company to be invited too. His firm had been one of the bidders we beat in the acquisition war. They'd all be seated at my VIP table, and when Langford introduced me on stage with the words, "Please welcome our chairwoman and visionary founder," that dinner table smirk of Ryan's would finally disappear. Not because I raised my voice, but because my silence had finally become impossible to ignore. If you ever want to disappear, build something quietly. Let the world think you're stagnant while your ideas grow. Roots beneath the soil. Let the noise stay outside while you sweat in silence. That's how I built Sparkmint. I still remember the first logo I designed. It was ugly 3 jagged blue lines with a lightning bolt in the middle. I didn't have money for a graphic designer, so I made it on a free website and promised myself I'd fix it once we survived the next month. The first year nearly broke me. I was doing everything: coding, marketing, invoicing, customer support. Every time someone asked, "How big is your team?" I'd smile and say, "Small but mighty." What I meant was, it's just me and I'm drowning. I pitched to 47 investors in the first 6 months. 46 said no. The 47th said maybe. I built the entire backend for that client in 10 days. Slept under my desk, ate canned soup. Nearly lost my eyesight staring at code. But that client. Padan brought 2 more dot, then 4 dot, then 10. Sparkmint wasn't just real now. It was growing. I hired my first developer, Mina, a brilliant woman from Nairobi who worked remotely. Then came Lucas, a UX designer from Brazil. We called ourselves the Ghost Team because we kept everything low profile, barely showing our faces on LinkedIn or online. We weren't building for attention, we were building for survival. Langford joined 6 months after that. I'll never forget our first Zoom call. He wore a black button-up and looked at me like he already knew something I didn't. "I've reviewed your source code," he said. "And honestly, Ava, it's cleaner than half the Fortune 500 apps I've seen." I laughed nervously. "You think it's good enough to scale?" He raised an eyebrow. "I think it's good enough to make history." That's when things shifted. Langford introduced systems, order power. He made me stop apologizing when I negotiated. He reviewed contracts like a hawk and showed me how to demand what I was worth. He stopped letting me sign emails as founder and insisted I use executive director. "You're more than a founder," he said. "You're the brain, the vision. Own it." I wanted to. But I still carried the voice of my family in my head, especially Ryan's. "Big dreams, Ava, but dreams don't pay rent." I never told him Sparkmint paid for my rent. Then my building. Then 3 buildings across 2 continents. By year 3, we were powering automation for logistics firms in Europe, government agencies in South Asia, and even healthcare systems in Canada. We weren't flashy, but we were indispensable. The big dogs noticed. That's when Langford pulled me into the biggest negotiation of my life. Acquisition plus merger with Gridlance, a global infrastructure conglomerate. We were merging systems, not selling out. But the deal meant I would now hold majority ownership. While Langford retained day-to-day CEO duties, he was better suited for the stage. I was the architect, and I was fine with that. Until Ryan opened his mouth at dinner. I never planned to attend the Gala Tech Summit that week. I'd planned to stay behind the scenes like always. But Langford had other plans. "You need to be there," he said. "They're giving us the Innovation Award. You're the founder. You are the story." I hesitated. What if I run into people I know? He smiled. "That's the point." I knew he meant Ryan, and yeah, maybe a part of me wanted to be seen now, not just by strangers. but by the people who had dismissed me when it mattered. I made one call to the summit director. Can you confirm which company sits at table 4? Velocity Tech, she replied. That was Ryan's firm. Perfect. Can you do me a favor? I asked. Move them to table 1. That's our VIP. I'd like to host. She laughed. You sure? Velocities. Rep can be a bit arrogant. I smiled. He won't be, after this. Back at my apartment, I stood by the mirror, rehearsing the moment. I didn't want to be petty. I just wanted to be undeniable. I pulled out the designer dress Langford had gifted me months ago. One I never thought I'd wear. It was midnight black, silk, and cut in a way that screamed both elegance and control. I stepped into it like I was stepping into a new skin. One Ryan couldn't peel away with a single insult. As I fastened the last clasp, my phone buzzed again. Langford, red carpet at 6, speech at 8, press at 9, and just a heads up. Ryan's company will be seated next to us. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was it. No more hiding, no more silence, no more playing small. Tomorrow night, my past would meet my present, and for once, I wouldn't be the one shrinking. I barely slept the night before the gala. It wasn't nerves. It was adrenaline. There's a certain quiet that comes right before your life changes, a kind of buzzing in your bones. Like your spirit knows the moment it's been waiting for is walking toward you with open arms. I woke up at 5 a.m. and opened my laptop. The Forbes pre-release article was scheduled to go live 2 hours before the event. Langford said it would be better that why let the headlines hit just as I stepped onto the red carpet. Smart man. As I sipped my coffee, I skimmed the article again. In a tech industry still dominated by loud voices and louder egos, Ava Cole chose a different route, one of silence, strategy, and staggering success. From a one-woman startup to a multinational automation platform now powering over 1,000 businesses. Sparkman's rise proves that the underdog doesn't bark. She builds. I scrolled to the final line. The woman who sat quietly at the table now owns it. I leaned back in my chair, smiling, not out of pride, but peace. This wasn't revenge. This was arrival. I booked a stylist, a car, and a PR rep for the night. Langford handled the media, and my assistant, Jenna, double-checked every schedule block. But there was one thing. To myself. I pulled up Velocity Tech's company site. Ryan was listed as VP of Strategy, a fancy title for someone who jumped from one shiny project to the next, pitching ideas and rarely staying long enough to finish them. Still, he was loud, known, charismatic. He had no idea the company that had outbid them for the $8.5 million integration contract last month was mine. I clicked into a recent podcast he'd done, and about 20 minutes in, I heard him laugh and say, some no-name AI firm took that deal. Probably 2 kids in a basement with a chatbot. Not worried. I paused the audio and stared at his smirking face. Tomorrow, he'd learn who the basement kids were. And more importantly, who funded the building they could never enter. The day flew by in a flurry of dress fittings, hair consultations, and tech rehearsals. Langford met me backstage at the venue, reviewing the evening's flow while adjusting his cufflinks like we were about to walk into a Senate hearing. You ready for this? He asked. I nodded. It's not the stage that scares me. Then, seeing their faces, he smiled. Let them stare. It's about time. By 6:30, the ballroom buzzed with tech executives, media reps, influencers, and investors. Gold chandeliers shimmered above a sea of tuxedos and floor-length gowns. The carpet glowed under spotlights. Banners reading Galatech Summit 2025 celebrating innovation that changes the world lined the walls. I arrived fashionably late on purpose. The black silk dress hugged me like armor, and my heels clicked with precision as I stepped onto the carpet, camera flashes erupting like fireflies. My name was already trending on X. Langford met me halfway and offered his arm. Ava Cole, chairwoman, boss, visionary. I rolled my eyes playfully. Don't gas me up too hard. You built a legacy from zero. It deserves every light in this room. As we approached table 1, I scanned the faces. There he was, Ryan. He stood as I approached. Blinking in confusion, mouth parting slightly. His eyes dropped to the name tag. Ava Cole Sparkman. CHRWOA man, then flicked to the massive Sparkman logo projected above the main stage. Claire's girlfriend was already nudging him. "Wait, that's your sister?" she asked, voice just loud enough to turn a few heads. I smiled calmly. "Good to see you, Ryan. Hope your team enjoys the view." Langford pulled out my chair like a king presenting a throne. Ryan just stood there, frozen, not angry, not proud. Just caught off guard in the most perfect, poetic way. The silence was everything I had dreamed of. 10 minutes later, a junior host came by our table and asked for Miss Cole's preferred intro title. Langford answered before I could. Chairwoman and founder. And please emphasize the founder part. Ryan's jaw, TENSED. Claire glanced between us like she was watching a movie. I gently dabbed my lips with a napkin and turned. To Ryan, funny. Remember last night at dinner? He cleared his throat. Ava, you'll never amount to anything. That's what you said? Remember? His mouth opened. No words came. I wasn't offended, I added, coolly. I just knew I had a better answer coming. Turned back to Langford. Shall we get ready for the speech? Let's. As we left the table and walked toward the stage entrance, the MC's voice echoed across the ballroom. Tonight's Innovation Award goes to a company that quietly changed the automation. Game scaling globally without sacrificing integrity or vision. Please welcome the chairwoman and founder of Sparkman, Ava Cole. The audience erupted in applause. I stepped into the spotlight, not to prove Ryan wrong, but to finally embrace the truth. I was never the failure. I was just unseen. And now, that era was over. The applause was a wave loud, then louder. But I didn't hear any of it. I only heard my heartbeat. And the subtle hush that settled when I stepped onto the stage. Thousands of eyes, bright lights. Flashes like stardust, and somewhere in the crowd, Ryan. He was watching. Not as the proud brother. Not as the golden boy of the family, but as someone finally realizing he wasn't the only star in the room. I reached the mic, took a breath, and smiled. 3 years ago, I began. I was working in a cramped studio apartment with a cracked window and no heating. I had no team, no funding, and honestly, no idea how I was going to survive another month. Then, room went quiet curious, but I had a dream. And when the world told me to think smaller, to be realistic, to play safe, I chose to build instead. I paused, letting the silence do the work. Tonight, I accept this award not just for Sparkman, but for every founder who ever felt overlooked. For every woman who was told she wasn't enough. For every underdog who chose not to bark but to build. Scattered applause. Then a rising swell of clapping, standing, echoing through the ballroom. Langford nodded from the side of the stage. My team stood too. Mina, Lucas, Jenemy, Day-ones. And yes, Ryan was still seated. Stiff. Silent. I didn't look at him directly. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I came to say after the ceremony. The ballroom shifted into cocktail mode. Waiters floated by with champagne. And jazz hummed from a live quartet. I was swarmed by press. What was it like rising so quietly? Why didn't we know about you sooner? What would you say to young women watching tonight? I gave polished, powerful answers, every one of them shaped by the pain of being dismissed, ignored, and underestimated. But in the middle of it all, I noticed Ryan walking toward me. His pace wasn't confident like usual. He looked smaller somehow. He waited until the cameras cleared before he spoke. Ava, I turned, holding my glass loosely. Ryan, he rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't know. It's kind of the point, I replied softly. He blinked. We always thought you were doing your little tech thing. I didn't realize it was this, and never asked. He winced. I guess not. I didn't think you needed validation. I offered permission, praise. He sighed. No, I always thought I was the one supposed to make it. I tilted my head. And you thought that meant I couldn't. He didn't answer. Instead, he said the one thing I wasn't expecting. I'm sorry. Not defensive, not sarcastic, just honest. I studied him for a long moment. Behind all the bravado, he finally looked like what he'd never allowed himself to be. Human. I forgive you, I said. But you should know. That comment at dinner. That wasn't the first time. He looked down, and I'm not asking you to be proud of me now. I'm just asking you to see me. I do, he said. Now I do. Later that night, the family group chat exploded. Mom, Ava, why didn't you tell us? Dad, congratulations, sweetheart. We're so proud Mom saw your photo in the Tribune. You looked stunning. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I had already heard everything I needed on stage, in silence. And in the stunned expression on Ryan's face, the next morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee and no makeup, barefoot, watching the sun crawl across the skyline. Langford sent me a photo from the summit, me at the mic, hand midair, spotlights behind me. Langford, you didn't just show up, you arrived. Me, took long enough. Langford, timing's everything, boss. I scrolled through my inbox. A subject line stood out. Subject, Forbes cover story request. Urgenty, clicked it open. We'd love to feature you in next month's Women in Tech issue. Cover story slot available. Let us know if you're open. I closed my laptop, not because I wasn't ready, but because I was. The morning after the gala, my face was everywhere. Business blogs, tech news, Twitter, X. Even my old university's alumni page posted, former student wins Global Innovation Award, now leads $40 million automation empire. I didn't even know they remembered me. But the spotlight has a way of exposing. What was always there, people who ignored you suddenly want to claim you. And those who doubted you suddenly want to be proud. That included my family. The phone. Calls started just after 10 a.m. first. My mother, Ava, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We're just shocked. You were so composed last night. So powerful. Her voice was sweet, almost too sweet. Like she'd forgotten the way she brushed past my childhood. Wins like they were dust on the mantelpiece. I just wanted to focus on the work, I replied, not the noise. Well, she laughed nervously. Your brother feels terrible. You know how he jokes too much? I could picture her wringing her hands, trying to patch up the image of the golden sun. We're all proud of you, honey. Really? I thanked her politely, but I didn't offer more. I wasn't ungrateful. I was just done bending backward. To be seen. Then came the call. I wasn't expecting my father. He rarely said much. A man of few words and fewer emotions. But that afternoon he called just to say, I read your speech. You've become someone I wish I'd understood better. It hit harder than I expected. Maybe because he'd never said something like that. Maybe because all my life I'd been shouting without a voice. And now I didn't need to shout anymore. He ended the call with, You did good, Ava. 3 words. But they echoed louder than any of Ryan's insults. Ryan, to his credit, didn't reach out for a few days. I figured he needed space. When he finally did text, it was short. RYAN. I'd like to grab coffee if you're ever up for it. Just to talk. I didn't reply immediately. I needed time. And not because I was still angry, but because I wanted the meeting to be real, not reactive. No cameras, no suits, no expectations, just brother and sister. Meanwhile, my inbox flooded with speaking requests, investment offers, job applications from people I'd once begged for help. Funny how quickly things change when the lights shift. Langford handled most of it. I focused on what I loved building, mentoring my team. scaling the platform into underserved regions. But behind the success, there was something else rising inside me. Grief. Grief for the years I spent doubting myself. Grief for the 18-year-old version of me crying alone in her dorm because her family didn't attend her pitch competition. Grief for the birthday dinner where Ryan toasted himself and forgot I was even there. Grief that now, with the world clapping, it felt strangely quiet inside. One night, I scrolled through old family photos on my phone, ones I hadn't looked at in years. There was Ryan at his high school graduation, shaking hands with the principal. There was Mom beaming beside him, Dad looking proud. And there I was in the corner of the frame, blurred out, holding my award from the science fair no one asked me about. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit delete, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need proof anymore. I had rewritten the ending. A few days later, I agreed to meet Ryan. For coffee. We picked a quiet cafe in the Arts District. No fancy branding. No suits. Just as siblings, years apart in ways deeper than age. He was already there when I walked in, nervous, hands clasped around a ceramic cup like it was a lifeline. "Hey," he said, standing awkwardly. "Thanks for coming." "Hey." We sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he broke the silence. "I want to start by saying I was wrong. And not just the other night, but for years." Stayed quiet. He continued. "I think I was so used to being the center of attention that I didn't know how to see anyone else, especially not my own sister." I looked at him, not coldly, just calmly. "I wasn't looking for your approval, Ryan. I just didn't want to be dismissed." He nodded. "I know. And the truth is, I envied you. You had fire. You had focus. I was always performing. You were actually building. That surprised me. I didn't know he saw that. I was proud of you, you know," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how to show it without feeling smaller." We sat in that silence. It wasn't heavy. It was healing. I sipped my coffee. "You weren't small. You were just loud." He chuckled. "Fair." Before we left, he asked, "Can I visit the office sometime?" "Just to see it." I smiled. "You'll need a visitor badge. And maybe a better attitude." He grinned. "I'll work on both." We hugged before parting, not a Hollywood hug, not dramatic, just real. And that was enough. 2 months after the gala, I was standing in front of a sea of college students, giving a guest lecture at my old university. Funny how the same campus that once watched me walk across it unnoticed now had my name printed on banners and event flyers. Next Gen Series Presence. Ava Cole, founder of SparkMint. Building in silence, scaling with fire. As I stood on the stage, looking out at hundreds of faces filled with potential, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who sat in the back row with ideas bursting inside her, but no one to validate them. Now, students raise their hands just to ask how I stayed resilient, how I built without being seen. I stopped building for applause, I told them, and started building for impact. That was the truth. After the event, the dean invited me to a private dinner in my honor. As I walked into the candlelit faculty hall, I caught sight of my old business professor, Dr. Hayworth. He had once told me, "You're creative, Ava, but too timid for leadership." Now he stood clapping as I entered. "Ava," he beamed. "If I could go back and rewrite every recommendation I ever made, I'd start with you." I laughed. "I think you just did." It was surreal. Tables of faculty, advisors, and students all waiting to hear my story. But as I sat down, my phone buzzed with a message that brought my whole world into sharp focus. Langford Velocity Tech just submitted a merger proposal. Guess who they want to lead the integration? Me? No way. Langford Way. Want to guess who put in the referral? Me. "Tell me, Langford, your brother." Stared at the screen for a long moment. "Ryan, the next morning I called him. "Thanks," I said simply. "No problem," he replied. "Just figured if someone's going to lead the future, it should be the one who already built it." That moment. That was the apology, the recognition, and the redemption all in one. I didn't need him to grovel, I just needed him to grow. Weeks passed. Sparkman's valuation doubled. Forbes ran the cover. TechCrunch called us the silent giant. I began mentoring young women in tech girls who reminded me of myself. Then one evening, I was invited back home for a small family dinner. This time, it felt different. Dad grilled salmon. Mom lit candles. Ryan helped with the dishes. No one asked about my little startup. Everyone knew now, and at the dinner table, Ryan raised a glass. "To Ava," he said. "Built a company we all wish we'd believed in sooner." He looked me in the eye, and who didn't need our belief to do it anyway. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because something bigger bloomed in my chest. Peace, dash, 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 after dinner. As I walked to my car, Ryan caught up with me. "One last thing," he said. He pulled something from his pocket. "A copy of that Forbes cover and a pen. Will you sign it?" I laughed. "You're serious?" He nodded, grinning. "Framing it for my office." I signed it. It's the brother who finally saw me, Ava. We hugged again, not as rivals, not as siblings stuck in old roles, but as grown adults dash equals dot, maybe even friends. That night, I sat alone on my apartment balcony, barefoot, wrapped in a hoodie, sipping tea. The city sparkled. I thought about all the dinners I left early, all the comments I absorbed in silence, all the nights. I cried behind login screens and empty spreadsheets, and I smiled because they didn't break me. They built me, and now I was the one at the head of the table. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or silenced, remember, your silence can be your power. Build in it. Rise from it. Make sure you're already standing tall. Subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. Like, comment, and share if you've ever been the underdog.